Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. Well, we spent the last couple of weeks tracking what is happening in Israel and the Middle East. Tonight, let's stay home and catch up on developments right here in the United States. Taking his cue from Rahm Emanuel's famous dictum, you never want a serious crisis to go to waste, President Obama recently compared the Gulf oil spill to the terrorist attacks on September 11th in magnitude. He said, in the same way that our view of our vulnerabilities and our foreign policy was shaped profoundly by 9/11, I think this disaster is going to shape how we think about the environment and energy for many years to come. The president announced that he would use the opportunity for a fresh push to pass the energy and climate bill that has been stalled since the outbreak of ClimateGate scandal last year. The media-induced global warming panic had reached such a fever pitch that only 2 years ago, when candidate Obama promised that under his plan energy prices would necessarily skyrocket, it actually helped him get elected. When ClimateGate broke, though, it was learned that the leading scientists alleging the existence of man-made global warming fabricated or manipulated the evidence that formed the basis for that conclusion. Despite a massive cover-up by the mainstream media, the UN, the White House, and the environmentalists, the global warming panic subsided. Last year's Copenhagen conference was actually a global effort to introduce a world cap-and-trade scheme. Under cap-and-trade, the government will place an emission cap or limit on greenhouse gas emissions. Companies that don't use their full allotment can sell their unused carbon credits in a global marketplace. Companies that overproduce greenhouse gases can buy these unused credits and go their merry way, polluting as they will. So there's no less pollution, only money changing hands. Does that make sense to you? The plan will create a new trading market worth trillions of dollars in literally the most massive transfer of wealth in history. Rich nations will pay more for carbon credits, with the proceeds going to benefit less wealthy countries. Driving the whole scheme is the fear that unlimited greenhouse gas emissions are responsible for catastrophic global warming. Coincidentally, one of the emissions labeled a dangerous greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide. Since you emit carbon dioxide every time you exhale, the cap-and-trade scheme is ultimately a tax on breathing. The Copenhagen Conference, convened to hammer out a global taxation scheme under the guise of preventing global warming, collapsed in disarray, and with it went the administration's environmental and energy legislative plans. Now, almost 2 months after the Gulf oil spill began, the White House once again sees a chance to turn a crisis into a political opportunity. The website Politico quoted Mr. Obama saying, "The crisis would force the country to move forward in a bold way in a direction that finally gives us the kind of future-oriented, visionary energy policy that we so vitally need and has been absent for so long." He also said, "One of the biggest leadership challenges for me going forward is going to be to make sure that we draw the right lessons from this disaster." And you know what that's going to be. In the same interview, the president said he could not predict whether the nation would transition completely from an oil-based economy within his lifetime. But now is the time for us to start making that transition and investing in a new way of doing business when it comes to energy. Now, I would say this proves that President Obama views Rahm Emanuel's admonition to never waste a good crisis as not only correct, but also the basis for forming a radical new policy. After almost 2 months of nonstop criticism for its lackadaisical approach to the oil spill, the White House finally went on the offensive. Defending his lack of action, the president said he was still talking to experts in order to figure out whose rear end to kick. Unfortunately, the president expressed this in decidedly unpresidential terms. In his actual interview on ABC News, it appears that the administration has figured out a way to sound like they're doing something despite the obvious fact that they don't know any more than BP does. Since they can't stop the spill, the next best thing is to focus the anger away from the White House and on to BP. White House advisor David Axelrod articulated the new administration strategy when he told Meet the Press on Sunday, "I don't consider them a partner. They're not social friends. We'll stay on them and make sure they're fully accountable." In order to effectively deflect the blame for its lack of action, the White House needed a villain upon which to focus the growing public anger. Tony Hayward, the CEO of BP, fit the bill. However, after 2 weeks of bashing BP and its chief, something very troubling for the U.S. taxpayers has resulted. BP investors have started pulling out. Predictably, the company's stock prices began plummeting as the White House and the Congress started talking about confiscating BP shareholders' dividends. If its stocks tank, then BP shareholders, mostly pension funds, will lose their investments. All new investors will take their money elsewhere. BP will be forced to bankruptcy. And then who's going to pay to clean up the guff after the administration kills the goose that lays the golden eggs? You guessed it, you and me and all U.S. taxpayers. Nice going, sir. You really are acting presidential.
You can now own Hal Lindsey's complete teaching of A Man Called Stephen. In this 90-minute 2-CD set, Hal explores in depth the genius, the beauty, and the power of Stephen's defense of the gospel before the Sanhedrin. This 2-CD set can be yours for a gift of $25, which includes shipping and handling. Simply request A Man Called Stephen and send your gift of $25 to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74147. You can also order online at hallindsey.com or by phone, toll-free at 1-888-RAPTURE.
Now is the time. You may not have another. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.